Many of us have seen the devastating satellite photos coming out of the flooding on the Grand Bahama Island as a result of Hurricane Dorian. Hurricanes are not new, but we also know that climate change is fueling bigger, meaner hurricanes. Hurricanes are fed by two things: water and warmth. As the oceans warm and swell with the melting water from our polar caps, scientists predict that hurricanes will get bigger and flooding will increase. Many of us this week have heard that the current political administration is rolling back the Endangered Species Act. This move will likely lead to the extinction of animal species. And extinction is not new. Extinction, in fact, is a fundamental core part of life, a core piece of evolution. Without extinction, we would not have the millions of individual species that populate the earth. Survival of the fittest and adaptation are fundamentally paired with death and failure to adapt. But there is more extinction happening now than there has been since the time of the dinosaurs. The fourth principle calls us into a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Scientific literacy, awareness of the way that biodiversity and climate science radiates out from the epicenters of human impact, is part of that search for truth and meaning. For the last 4 years, I have had the honor of teaching kids about evolution. Not in a high school biology style class, but teaching kindergartners and second graders and fourth graders. For a few years, we did it as a summer camp, and now we do it as a year-long series once a month, where caregivers are encouraged to attend and learn alongside their kids. We get messy. We talk about stardust and atoms and molecules and galaxies. We talk about the sometimes obvious and sometimes surprising ways that animals are related to one another. We talk about decomposition, what happens after an animal is dead. We pull out magnifying glasses and look closely at fossils. We talk about our early human ancestors. We learn about radical archaeologists like Mary Leakey, and we learn about the footprints that she found in the lava fields. And then we pull off our own shoes and make our own plaster footprint casts in sand. We learn about the early cave art that Neanderthals left in caves in France and paint with our own animal hair brushes. Each fall in classrooms around the nation, teachers have kids doing leaf rubbings, years before they can understand photosynthesis. In classrooms across the nation, teachers introduce colors with paint and pastels and color wheels years before kids will learn about the rods and cones in their eyes that allow them to perceive the hues. But we are slow to explain to kids evolution, this huge arching piece of the human puzzle. We hold the pieces like they're fragile, too complex for young minds. We introduce species and even the branches of zoology long before we are clearly explaining that all of these species are interconnected, coming from the same source. We teach children to categorize reptiles versus mammals without explaining the continuum between the categories. The platypus and the echidna, with their beaks and eggs and milk patches. I appreciate the enthusiasm with which we call them mammals. But let's be real. They are transitional species between those of us who lay eggs and dig for worms with beaks and those of us with mammary glands and fur. I love the Fish with Feet classes. I love having these first messy conversations with kids about where we come from and what makes us human. I realized this week, though, staring at the rollback of the Endangered Species Act, that I have been conceptualizing this work as personal growth work, fourth principle work. Giving kids the tools to understand themselves and their place in the human and primate and animal families. Giving kids the tools to better understand their own emotions and their own existence. And I've been conceptualizing this as fourth principle work. And I've been conceptualizing this as seventh principle work, helping kids to understand the interconnected web of life. This week, however, I am reminded that this work of teaching kids the basic science of the world is also the work of justice. Hurricanes peak out at Category 5 on the how bad is this hurricane scale. Meteorologists and storm trackers are now discussing adding to this scale because the storms are getting worse. Understanding the climate science behind these storms is justice work. The way we as a nation respond when these storms hit states, hit territories, hit countries, is justice work. The way we acknowledge and sit with and then work to protect those species endangered by human activity on this earth is justice work. And we cannot fully engage in that work until we understand the complex and delicate process by which we all exist here. I am honored and grateful to do the work of helping parents introduce evolution, human origins, and biodiversity to their kids. By rooting this knowledge early into their schemas of our interrelated world, we are able to best give them the tools to really understand and hopefully, ultimately, advocate for their world.